Greetings, my YouTube friends. This is Guru Too Cool coming to you yet again on The People's Connection. Thank you for joining me. Today's topic is going to be on a study that found that race, in fact, does matter in police shootings. This is a study that was put out on April 27th by the Washington Post, and it was edited by Tom Jackman. Let's get to it. The headline in the Washington Post is Under True Crime, this study found race matters in police shootings, but the results may surprise you. Here are two police officers here from the Fairfax County police officers who use a video simulator to practice their approach to a woman wielding a knife. Researchers at Washington State University used a similar device to measure how officers react to black and white suspects in identical scenarios. So, the conventional thinking about police involved shootings and some scientific research has been that black suspects are more likely to be shot than white suspects because of an implicit racial bias among police officers. But now, a new study has found exactly the opposite. Even with white officers who do have racial biases, officers are 3 times less likely to shoot unarmed black suspects than unarmed white suspects. With that said, before I move on, I must say here is an area, and the Washington Post is, to me, guilty of what black people in general across the United States we experience. We experience studies done like this that are not based on facts and reality. You guys will print stuff like this saying that their black suspects are 3 times less likely to be shot, uh, and that's just simply not the truth. It's not the truth. You cannot wish the reality away just by meager words. And so, Washington Post, shame on you for even posting a study like this, though, because here it is. We're going to go down this study because I want this to be exposed. I think we should start exposing white media and some of the things that they say, just so that we put them on notice that we're not going for this anymore. The article continues. The results come from a laboratory project at Washington State University using highly realistic police simulators in which actors in various scenarios approach and respond to officers on large, high definition video screens in an attempt to recreate critical situations on the street. The officers are equipped with real guns modified to fire infrared beams rather than bullets, and the scenarios can breach into conflict or cooperation depending on the officer's words and actions. It's the third time researchers at Washington State, Lois James, Stephen M. James, and Brian J. Villa, have set up simulators to monitor the differing reactions of police when confronted by white or black suspects. And all 3 times they found that officers took significantly more time to fire their weapons if the suspect was black, according to their latest report, quote, The Reverse Racism Effect, unquote, to be published in the journal Criminology and Policy. Continuing on, it goes on to say that it's a complex subject dating back to a 1974 study which concluded that the police have one trigger finger for whites and another for blacks. A 1978 report found that 60% of black suspects shot by the police carried handguns, compared with 35% of white suspects. In 2001, a statistical study showed that black people comprised 12% of the population but committed 43% of the killings of officers. You know, here's where the media also shows its racism towards African Americans. They print stuff like this while not even explaining the percentages and how they've come up with them. Number one is that when they say that 60% of black suspects shot by the police carried handguns, 60% of 40 million versus 35% of white suspects, which they put right there, 35% of 300 million, or 299 to 300 million whites. So The comparison isn't even a real comparison. You're comparing apples and oranges. You guys always do that. And then right above, when I read about the reverse racism effect, there is no reverse racism. You guys say that kind of stuff to try to use propaganda, is what you're doing, because blacks can't be racist. We don't have a system set up of a government. We don't have a racist system set up that is against other people based on color. You guys do that. We don't have that kind of system. So you're telling a false narrative. So going a little further down, it goes on to say, but there has been a contrary narrative that officers are hesitant to fire at black suspects, starting with a 1977 analysis of reports from major metropolitan departments which found officers fired more shots at white suspects than at black suspects, possibly because of, quote, public sentiment concerning treatment of blacks, unquote. And in 2004, David Klinger at the University of Missouri, St. Louis, interviewed more than 100 officers and found, quote, evidence of increased wariness about using deadly force against black suspects for fear of how it would be perceived and the associated consequences. I'm not going to continue on this article, this study here, because it is so backwards and filled with false information. They didn't include, there's so many questions that could be asked in this study, and it's written from a Eurocentric perspective. That's another point to most of these articles written by quote unquote white media. You guys have a certain agenda where you guys look at things a certain way. So it's always from your perspective. And we live in a multicultural world where everyone has ideas about things and about situations. And when we look at these studies, we see other things that you guys don't pick out. You guys, even this story right here, written about some of the things in your study, you're talking about certain things that you want to talk about to substantiate your argument. But there's so many factors that we could counter into this. Like I said, I'm not even going to continue on with the rest of the article, because what I'm doing is I'm giving your article energy, and I'm trying not to do that when it's based on false information. If your information was more accurate, then maybe I would go down the whole thing, but I can't. So with that said, people have common sense. People have eyes of their own to where they can see. People can read on their own. We don't need you, white media, to tell us things that you find in your studies, because we know that your studies are not based on truth and facts. We're tired of your propaganda that you've been feeding us. We have social media, and we're going to start telling our story. We're going to start debunking your falsehoods and your false stories that you keep printing, that you keep putting in on the news. We're going to start debunking those things. There's some of us out here, we're just simply tired of it. And I ask you too, if you're tired of it, leave a message, leave a comment, leave a thumbs up. Let's let them know that we're just tired of this. We're not going for it anymore. Studies like that are not based on facts. They're based on falsehoods, and usually it's based on stereotypes enough to comfort the conscience of white Americans. That's what most of these things are done for. I noticed that you guys won't do a study on pedophilia in America, because if you did, you would have to talk about more white people, because the majority of pedophilias in America, across America, has been white males. But I notice you don't do a study on that. See what I mean? It has to fit your narrative. And that's where we're tired of it. We're not going to go for it anymore. So, with that said, I leave you with that. This is Guru Too Cool coming to you again on the People's Connection. Thank you for joining me. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. Hit that like button. Leave me a message. Peace.